our viewing audience. Gospel International Magazine will be featuring a segment called Their History, and which we will have the opportunity and the privilege to talk with Dr. Prez Blackmon. Let me first start off saying that one of the reasons I am so honored and privileged to be able to do this interview, Dr. Blackmon, is because, number one, I'm in the historical studios of KTYM that's been serving the community since 1958.
Right.
Then, which was the year that I was born. Also, I know you can laugh. Also, not only KTYM being so historical, but it is the place where I receive the tutelage and the mentoring by yours truly, Dr. Prez Blackmon. He taught me how to operate in a studio, a radio studio, taught me how to work the board, and he was very hard.
You think so?
Yes, you were. You were very hard, and you would not allow me to take notes because you told me I had a brain, so use it.
That's right.
Use it. But I thank him very much because of him, I was able to not only operate in the studios of KTYM, but later on I was able to go and work with the ICN network, an online radio network, which is the International Christian Network, and I was able to go to other places, and it's all because of you. So let me first of all start by saying thank you, sir, and I'm so glad to have this privilege.
You're so kind. I am honored to be here as we return home for you and I, back here on the corners of 68th and Western Boulevard. It's a blessing.
Yes, it is a blessing. And for those of you that are viewing this this segment, I want you to know that Dr. Blackmon has chose to stay COVID compliant by keeping his mask on through the entire interview. But he did give me permission. He allowed that I'm not wearing my mask. I do have one and I do wear it, but I'm not wearing it during this interview so that you can hear me more clearly, but he will choose to keep his mask on the entire time. And so I love it. It has a microphone and it has Dr. Prez Blackmon on it. But let's get right on into the interview. First of all, Prez, I think that people would like to know, where are you from originally?
Born in a little place called Eudora, Arkansas, years ago. And of course, from there, things just went on from Eudora, Arkansas to Indiana.
Okay. An Arkansas man.
That's it.
All right. So you haven't always been in Los Angeles?
No.
And like in your family, your siblings?
I have, 8 brothers and sisters? Really was 9. 2 are deceased now. And everybody's in Indiana, except for the ones that expired.
Oh, so all of your family now is in Indiana?
With the exception of my 2 wonderful children, Prez and Nikki, they're here in Los Angeles.
Yeah, who is Prez II is a wonderful artist, recording artist his own self.
Right.
And then you did share with me at one time that your daughter Nikki, that she is a great singer also.
Nikki's a very good singer. Nikki chose to, she wants to be in the announcer arena. That's why you would always see her on the Lee Williams concert, and I would use her as my co-MC.
Okay. Now, I was very surprised to find out that at an early age, you had a speech impediment.
I had a speech impediment so bad, I couldn't say 3 words in a half an hour. And it was only because of the good Lord that I took a speed reading course at the University of Notre Dame, and then the rest became history.
So you suffered with a speech impediment from your childhood on up to you went to college.
From when I was born up until 1964, 65.
Okay, one would never think by listening to you now that you suffered with a speech impediment and it was like stuttering. You stuttered so bad that you could hardly get words out.
Right.
And so how did you correct this speech impediment?
A young man by the name of Professor Tom Musical at the University of Notre Dame took me into a hall called O'Shaughnessy Hall upstairs where they had a student radio station. And I wanted to be a radio announcer, but I couldn't talk. So what they had is they had a little machine, and they would put a script in this machine, and it would go by for X amount of seconds, and you had to read a line. And once you read that line completely, then they would speed up a little bit faster, a little bit faster, a little bit faster, until you would honestly become able to break that impediment and then continue to project words and a sentence and a phrase and a paragraph, and the rest became history.
Okay, so that lets anybody that's watching right now, that lets you know that you can overcome any condition, any speech impediment, or any problem, health challenge that you may have, if you have the desire and if you have the want to overcome. Because you had a desire to be a radio broadcaster. Is that correct?
I did.
And of course, many people would have heard you and listened to you and said, no way, son, find something else to do, get another talent, because you'll never be. But you never felt that.
No.
You always felt that you could overcome that speech impediment. So now we move on up to Notre Dame. Was that your career choice? Was that your only field in education that you were pursuing?
Yeah, I wanted to be a lawyer, believe it or not. But at the same token, I was moved by, with the grace of the good Lord, from all of the years of growing up in the South, such groups like the Mighty Clouds of Joy and the Soul Stirrers, and I wanted to be a radio announcer. And at the time, Sergeant Shriver and Eunice Johnson, the Office of Economic Opportunity, had a piece at Notre Dame and American University, and I pursued this, and the rest became history.
Okay, so your one desire, you wanted to be a lawyer, but you couldn't talk that well.
No.
But you were going to defend people.
Right.
Okay, and then you went into radio broadcasting.
Right.
All right, now, in the midst of that, you also did some time in the military.
I did. I served my country, excuse me, honorably, with the most elite unit, like Reverend Tom Blackwell, whose studio we're in right now, KTOM, United States Marine Corps, and that was United States the best. The Corps has always been the best. That's just, you understand? When you are a Marine, you are a Marine.
Simplify.
Yeah. Always faithful.
Always faithful. But you didn't go there by choice. You got drafted, right?
I was almost drafted. When the draft was going out, there was a letter came home to me in Indiana and says, you are hereby ordered to report to your nearest AFE's office for induction to the United States Armed Forces. So naturally, I saw the dress blues, and that just blew all of our minds, and so I chose the Marine Corps. Okay. And then from there, went to Chicago and applied, and went through all the paperwork details, and then from there, back to South Bend, and then next thing I knew, I was out here getting ready to head for Southeast Asia.
Wow. Okay, that's a lot of travel. Let me back for a minute. You started out in Arkansas. From Arkansas, went to Indiana. From Indiana, you came to Los Angeles, or you went to Chicago?
No, Chicago and Indiana, which South Bend and Chicago is just like Watts and Long Beach. It's just a few minutes apart. Okay,
just across the street from each other. Okay, and from there, you came to Los Angeles.
Came here.
You came to Los Angeles. Let's back, and I know we're doing quite a bit of traveling, but you have to remember that we're dealing with Dr. Prez Blackmon.
Oh, you're too kind.
Okay, so but when you went in the Marine Corps, and you served in there. Something also happened in the Marine Corps. You, I think, in our previous conversations, you said that your plane, I mean, not your plane, your helicopter got shot down. But during that time, also, besides serving in the military, you were training for the Olympics.
The 1972 Olympics in Munich, Germany, I had a dream and a desire to run because track and field was my favorite sport. And of course, back home, having a record in the Northern Indiana Valley Conference, I wanted to come out here and I wanted to run for the Marine Corps. And as it turns out, we got called over to Vietnam before it happened, and my helicopter was shot down December the 19th, 1970, and then the rest became history. My desire just like went down the tubes.
Okay, your desire for being an Olympian.
Yeah, because I had to have surgery after the helicopter was shot down on both legs. Then the rest, I just didn't have a desire to compete anymore after that.
Okay, so we almost had Dr. Blackmon almost became an Olympian because you were going to be running in the Olympics. It was before Carl Lewis, right?
Right, before Carl Lewis, yeah,
Okay.
72. And it turns out they had a civil unrest in Munich, Germany during the time of 1972, so that was like zeroed out right there.
Okay. All right, it keeps getting more and more and more interesting. Now, how long did you stay in the Marine Corps after the injury? The helicopter being shot down and then you having surgery on your legs. How much longer did you give the Marine Corps?
I gave them maybe another 2 years. And then after that, my whole tenure was 6 years, 2 months, 13 days, 8 hours, 5 minutes, and 50 seconds.
Thank you, Dr. Blackmon. That goes to show you never forget that experience.
No, 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines, 3rd Battalion, 1st Marines, French Protegés out of Hawaii. And I'm proud to say that I served my country honorably, decorated with a Purple Heart, and the rest is history.
And the rest is history. Okay, now, after Marine Corps, then is when we go in to broadcasting, correct?
Correct.
And how did that journey begin?
That journey began just before 30 days after my surgery was completed, and I felt well enough. I sent out letters because I had a choice of staying in California or going back home to South Bend. So what I did, I sent out letters to all of the different studios to get a job. That was number one. And then a gentleman by the name of George Cochran at CBS, Fairfax and Beverly, he received my letter and he called me up for an interview. And he told me, he says, we don't have any job openings here. He said, but I do have a girlfriend at NBC. And let me give her a call. So by the time that I got back to Camp Pendleton, he had kept his end of the bargain. And by me working at NBC after graduating from AU and back to ND, the rest was history. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, you carrying us up. You giving us the speed course here. Speed course here. Now, you were in California.
Yeah.
You were stationed at Camp Pendleton,
Right.
which is located out by San Diego,
Right.
California. Okay, then you were writing. You sent out letters.
Right.
And in all of the letters that you sent out, a man named
John Cochran from
John
CBS.
Cochran from CBS received your letter. But then he recommended there wasn't anything available at that time, right?
At CBS.
And so he recommended you try NBC.
Correct.
Okay. So you go to NBC?
Well, he made a phone call for me for NBC because I was in the Marine Corps and I had X amount of days to get out. And because of the Purple Heart, I guess it meant a lot to him. He valued my time in service. So he had a friend at NBC. It's like, you know somebody that I know somebody, and he knew somebody. And so the lady that he knew granted him that request to interview me. And so by the time I got back to Camp Pendleton, I had to turn around and then come back up to Los Angeles, and I interviewed at NBC, and then from NBC, the rest became history as a cameraman.
Oh, stop right there now. Okay. Now, When you got to NBC, you interviewed as a cameraman.
Right, right.
A cameraman. Now, for those that may not know, because we just cannot assume that our viewing audience know about CBS and NBC. Well, CBS is one of our local, well, not local, national television stations in California. Well, I know I can speak for Los Angeles. It's Channel 2, and NBC is Channel 4.
Correct.
So now we're dealing with the television stations. So you go to NBC and interview for a cameraman behind the scenes. Now, what shows were you as a cameraman? What shows were you working on?
In the 70s, to prove the point, Jess Marlowe, NBC News, Brian Gumbel was part of NBC, even Pat Sajak, he was part of NBC. And then as I proved myself to be worthy as a cameraman, they put me on they called the big money shows. Sanford and Son, Flip Wilson, Peyton Place, Days of Our Lives. These were the shows that paid the money in Navy, Local 53,
Okay.
the Union.
Now, if you don't mind me asking, what did a cameraman, how much was a cameraman's salary at, what year was this?
This was in 1972.
Okay.
And of course, it was all depending on the union and your union status. You understand?
And how many black people did you have working the cameras then?
There were two, matter of fact, a guy named Steve Cunningham and Andy Levert. These were my two mentors here, and the rest became history.
Okay. So you became number 3, huh?
Yeah.
All right. Working on the shows such as Sanford and Son,
Yeah.
Days of Our Lives,
Peyton Place.
Peyton Place.
Yeah.
Peyton Place was a very popular soap opera.
Yeah, exactly.
Soap opera at that particular time. I mean, it was almost like it was the edgy part of television, which now it would be nothing. It would be nothing now.
Right.
With what goes on television now. So now you become a cameraman, and then what happens?
I wanted to pursue the microphone, broadcasting, so I talked to several people about, different shows on the air at the time, and so I was told that the best way to do it is to produce your own show. That way you're not limited, you're not bound, you're not tied in, you do as you please. Get sponsors and the rest becomes history.
Okay, but to get sponsors for those kind of shows, I mean, like at that time, I remember that was sponsors like Tide detergent and, Joy dishwashing liquid and VO5. And so you had to go after those particular sponsors.
I went after those and, negative because it didn't occur. Because it had to be, I didn't know the ins and outs under the table that you needed to have contract representation. You understand? So therefore, there were little local shops around the city like Murray's Cafe and Jones Brothers Auto Parts and these kinds of businesses here that was able.
Just a minute. I have to let our viewing audience know. We are going back in history. If there's any millennials watching now or even any of the younger generation, these names may not seem familiar to you that Dr. Prez Blackmon is talking about. Some of these names are not familiar to you, but he's going to get to the familiar part. But those from my generation and further back, these were popular people, and this was the happening in Los Angeles.
And of course, my main sponsor, besides Murray's Cafe, was at that time the oldest black-owned operated mortuary in Southern California, Ashley Grigsby Smith and Williams Mortuary, located at 9920 South Central Avenue in Los Angeles. The late Miss Geraldine Ashley Woodbury was the owner and proprietor.
Yeah, of course, we remember Ashley Grigsby.
Yeah, well, that was my main sponsor when I started producing radio shows on my own, and then the rest became history.
Okay, now did this usher you into voiceovers and gospel, or where did it lead? What path did it lead you on?
It led me into producing my own style of radio, coming in from an R&B platform, and which was very, very good at the time because I had some great teachings along the way. Tom Cross and all of the other great jocks, and from that point on there, it just started going.
Okay, so first you started in R&B.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and you're speaking of, you just mentioned a gentleman by the name of Tom Cross.
Right.
And so you were explaining to me earlier through our conversation we were having that there was a difference at that time from, we call them now, on-air personalities.
Right.
But there was a difference from DJs, which at that time was stood for disc jockeys, right?
Right.
And from a person that did radio. And could you explain that, please?
During the days of disc jockey, there was a 45. The 45 had a little round circle, and there was a disc that went inside of it. The engineer was known as a disc jockey, okay? And then from there, if you were very good, then you became a disc jockey and a radio air personality, a radio announcer. You had to be super talented to do both. Because at one time, only the disc jockey, he played the music.
Only the DJ.
Only the DJ. And then you did the talking. And then as guys like Frankie
That was
Crocker,
the radio personality.
Right.
Okay.
All the young modern folks would call it now. And then from that point on there, if you became super talented as I taught you, then the rest became history. To become a disc jockey and radio personality at the same time.
All right. So what were the... Now, you mentioned Tom Cross and you talked about... Tom Reed.
The Master Blaster, of course.
Okay. These were people in Los Angeles?
Yes. Tom Reed was Los Angeles.
Okay.
Yeah. He just passed away a few months ago. And, of course, you had Tom Reed, Tom Cross, Roland Bynum, guys like that, Jammin' J. Rich. These are old personalities from years back.
Okay. At this particular time, now I'm coming up. I'm a teenager. You know, I'm a teenager doing this. I'm a teenager during this time. The popular station was KGFJ. I'm speaking from Los Angeles area, the West Coast. KGFJ. There was KJLH, which is Stevie Wonder's station now, but then it was only a jazz station, right?
Well, when Stevie bought it, Stevie got it from All Pro Broadcasting, Willie Davis. And then from Willie Davis, he got it from the name KJLH, John Lamar Hill. That's where KJLH came from.
Oh, I thought it was Kindness, Joy, Love, Happiness.
No, they added that on there. But KJLH always stood for John Lamar Hill. He was the owner, the original owner.
All right.
That's where the 102.3 came from.
And then there were the other popular stations were like K-Max.
K-Max came
K-Ace.
down.
Yeah. And who else?
KPPC was the Sunday gospel, the late Gloria Jean Bell, and I, along with Ruth Dickinson, the Reverend Rogers, the Cure, we were the first African Americans to go on KMAX FM 107.1. When the late Eric North, he started it from an underground rock station back in the early 70s. And then he had our personalities like the late Reverend Randy Strickland that had great spiritual productions, and the rest became history again.
Okay. Now, before we move up into the gospel, because we got a lot of history, for those of you that are viewing, once again, we want to let you know this is Gospel International, that we are interviewing Mr. Dr. Prez Blackmon. We're interviewing for a segment of Gospel International magazine known as Their History. As you are viewing, you can tell, and as you listen to the information that Dr. Prez Blackmon is giving, he's giving a lot of history, radio history, and television history as well. Now, for the R&B side, and then we're going to move on totally to the gospel. For the R&B, because you worked in R&B, right? And What was it that you did in R&B?
Basically, as an announcer, as a promoter, that's where I really got my promoting skills from. Was in R&B. On my own show that I produced, then I just went into trying to project me and make me a name brand. You understand? And after that,
Make you, Prez Blackmon.
a name brand.
Okay.
Yeah. And that was it.
All right, because you are a name brand. You known as sometime as the chairman of the board. All the time you're known as the voice.
That was from an award. Now, how that got started, the late Dr. E.L. Cordley, back in 1975, had an organization called Infinite Success Opportunity and Associates. And he had a...
Could you repeat that again, just slowly, because you moving fast.
Well,
Great.
of time.
I know.
Infinite Success Opportunity and Associates, the late Dr. E.L. Corley. And what he did is he searched for the best announcers in California. And he had an event at the Marriott Hotel. And believe it or not, on that particular night, I won the award, the Mr. Voice Award. And the late Reverend George Washington Easley Jr., he's the one that created the Mr. Voice. It wasn't me. He created that.
Okay. So that was created by the late Pastor George W. Easley.
Right.
He the one started with calling you the voice.
The little man with the big voice.
All right.
And,
all right.
and then the Reverend Randy Strickland, and then, of course, Clarence William Kendricks, who was my mentor here at this station, because he was the
Here
jock
at KTYM.
At KTYM. He had prime time in the evening when the horse races at Hollywood Park didn't take over.
Okay. Let's move on. That cracked me up. That right there. Okay. Now, who did you work with in R&B? Because you worked as a promoter and as a radio announcer in R&B. Who were some of the artists that you work with in R&B?
Well, believe it or not, he's now Bishop. Al Green was one of my favorites that I had to say that was my favorite of all time. I hosted for a lot of jocks like the late Johnny Taylor. Tyrone Davis was one of my biggest money makers. And of course, it just went on. Ollie Woodson, the Temptations, it just went on and on and on.
Okay. Now, that is real R&B, real old school music. So those of you that really know old school R&B, you know those names.
Yeah.
Those names are no surprise to you. Those are hit makers.
Exactly.
Right there.
Exactly.
So you did the R&B what, for how long?
10 years.
Okay, for 10 years. Then what made you want to transition from R&B to gospel?
My great-grandmother, Miss Hopi Williams, born November 14th, 1875, reared me, taught me everything between Genesis and Revelation. And, of course, in our house, you had to go to church.
Yeah, that's a must.
You had to go to
That's
church.
a must.
And
That
then
was
on
like
Sundays,
breathing.
you could not play, as they call, real and con songs then. And so from that point on there, God had been good to me and had blessed me to come through Southeast Asia. And I wanted to give something out to the people that was going to church, and that I was motivated because of when I read the story between Genesis and Revelation of what happened on Golgotha's hill because of my Savior, then that is what happened.
Okay. Now, did that start your tenure here in this studio at KTYM?
Well, it led here. The late Reverend Randy Strickland of Great Spiritual Productions, he had broadcast on KPPC, a station in Pasadena that was only on Sundays and Wednesdays. And then from that point on there, the late Gloria Jean Bell and I, we went to KMAX. And then when we knew that KMAX was about to fold, Al Williams, who was the owner of this station here, Gloria and I came here and petitioned Al and Mr. Borrego about gospel music here. And Clarence Kendricks was already here. And we wanted to get our names in this building as well also. And then from that point on there, then everything just started happening with Gospel Hour Productions that turned into Prez Graham. and the rest is now history.
Oh, so KTYM was not doing any gospel.
It was only low-key because at the same time then, Kendricks, he had the afternoon sold up, and that was it.
Okay.
Because as I before said, this was the powerful station for horse and jockey at Hollywood Park. This is where everybody tuned in, was KTYM, to find out
what the horses were doing.
Exactly.
So we have been thinking that KTYM was a gospel station, but it really wasn't a gospel station.
Had not been for horse and jockey, I think KTYM would have folded up, because horse and jockey made this station here exactly what it is. I mean, bookie joints all over the state, all over the city would tune in to KTYM for the first, second, and third, fourth races at Hollywood Park.
Well, I mean, it's right down the street from Hollywood Park, so
yeah.
you know, I guess it's no surprise for that. But okay, so we got gospel on KTYM, what you were involved in. How did it move to the Prez? Because you were doing that Saturday night show for how long? You've been in gospel, what, 45 years?
Yeah.
45 years.
Yeah.
That 45 years this man has been in gospel, that we know. First of all, let me say that one of the things of when I met you, Dr. Blackmon, I already knew about you because I had heard about you, your notoriety. Anybody that was somebody had to know about Prez Blackmon. I mean, if you were going to be in the gospel field in Los Angeles, within the gospel industry within Los Angeles, any type of quartet singing, if you didn't know Prez Blackmon, then you were just perpetrating.
That's so kind of you.
Yeah. You were just perpetrating. So now, when did you move into the Prez Graham? 45 years. 45 years that you have been doing gospel.
Prez Graham came about in the late 70s. After the late Mayor Tom Bradley, Church Rockin' Brucey Shepherd started the first Prez Blackmon's Day in August of 1975 at Sunset Baptist Church at the time. Then the rest started moving along, and we started hosting for a lot of quartet groups around the city of Los Angeles, like the Sweet Singing Cavaliers. Young man that was one of the best guitar players on the planet in Los Angeles is an international recording artist now, my brother Dave Shirley, that started with the Compatible Souls, and then he went on to the Golden Heirs, who I got a chance to produce right at 65th and Normandy, and of course Imperial and Western, and then it just went on and on and on.
And those names that he was just mentioning were names of various quartet groups here in Los Angeles, California. Hello, and welcome to Gospel International. This is our special feature entitled Their History. Welcome back to part 2 of our interview with veteran radio announcer Dr. Prez Blackmon. Of course, we have so much history that we have covered, and we still have much more history to cover, but we're going to try to give you as much as possible in this segment, part 2, with Dr. Prez Blackmon, Los Angeles, California. And we'd like to say, welcome, Dr. Blackmon.
Thank you, Dr. Susie Jones. It's an honor to be here with you.
Let's pick up from where we left off in part 1. We were talking about the many veteran radio announcers that have graced Los Angeles and have been active in the industry. And if you don't mind, I would like to read off a list of names that I have, because we want to pay homage to them, because some have gone on to be with the Lord, and some are yet still among us, but they had a great impact within the gospel music industry within Los Angeles, California. That's John and Vermia Phillips, and they were in radio for what, about 50 years or
65 years
65 years
plus.
And so both of them have gone on home to be with the Lord, and we definitely want to remember John and Vermia Phillips, Clarence Welch, Ollie Collins, Gloria Jean Bell, Willie Cotton, Prince Dixon, Ruth Dickerson, Reginald Utley, Art Calloway, Rose Oliver, Tony Denard, Dietrich Lacey, Reverend Dietrich Lacey, Dorothy Lacey, Bishop Leroy Lacey, Reverend Lane, and that's Sister Otha Lane, John Maxwell, Joe Matthews, Betty Edwards, Sylvester Henderson, Clarence Kendricks, Irma Robinson Chambers, Pastor Edward Jenkins, and now your current co-host, who co-hosts with you every Sunday morning, none other than my friend and my brother, Dr. Charles Williams. Those names that I have just mentioned, like I said, some have went on home to be with the Lord, but those were great people in the city of Los Angeles that impacted the gospel music and how it progressed in Los Angeles greatly.
So true, so true. We call them radio angels because they delivered that flow to help America, to help people in the city, surrounding areas, to endure whatever they were going through with various kinds of music and gospel.
Now, I want to also go to Region 6, which was an organization of mainly gospel radio announcers, correct?
Correct. Part of the Gospel Music Workshop of America. Of course, our leader at the time was Reverend Ed Jenkins, and who's now Pastor Ed Jenkins. I was treasurer and chaplain of the organization. We had a lot of great talent to come through there. It was so amazing because Region 6, it influenced a lot of the announcers to become announcers.
What would you say that in Los Angeles, well, I know that we are experiencing a pandemic, so everything has changed. But would you say that before this pandemic, that quartet music wasn't, I mean, that used to be the life of Sunday nights.
Right.
Was quartet music.
Right.
After you got through with your church home and your regular responsibilities and things, you were looking for where is a quartet program that you could go to. Would you say that that had died down in Los Angeles?
I think quartet died down when the late Deacon Eddie Cox passed because during the days of he and Church Rocking Ruth and Shepherd, they were like Fisher Sarah, Jane Fassman, I mean, the Sanctified Six. The younger quartets, they started placing more emphasis on money. And money wasn't the issue back then. It was about delivering a word and delivering a message. The younger quartets came in and they wanted to put everything on a dollar sign. You cannot focus on Jesus and a dollar sign at the same time. Because if you focus on the Lord is going to provide whatever you need. But when you go in focusing on how much you're going to get paid, you miss the whole blessing. You just cut yourself out.
So you're saying that there should be a priority. Well, of course, if you're preaching gospel, if you're teaching gospel, if you're singing gospel, Jesus Christ should be the center of attraction, and everything else should revolve around Him.
That's right.
Because your gift will make room for you and bring you before great men. Now, you were speaking about the Mighty Clouds of Joy, and you were telling me previously that they were the first gospel group that you took into a nightclub.
You know, it's amazing. They were the first group because at that time it was called rock gospel.
Rock
and
gospel.
A great insurance man, car salesman from the windy city of Chicago, Illinois, Donald Cornelius, had a show called Soul Train.
Okay, wait a minute. You gave out his whole full government name. Okay, we only know him as Mr. Don Cornelius,
Don
you know,
Cornelius
love,
is so
peace,
great.
and soul, you know.
Yeah.
But this one, Don Cornelius. So
Right.
now,
From
he
there,
approached you, huh?
huh?
Mr. Don Cornelius.
Johnny Martin, when the late great Johnny Martin came to KMAX when I was there years ago, back in the 70s, and he said, Prez, the Mighty Clouds getting ready to do something that has never been done before, and we want you to be with us when this happens. And so Church Rockin' Ruthie Shepherd was alive, my church rockin' mother, and I went to her and I talked to her about it. She said, well, go ahead and do it. And then I could never see myself doing gospel in a nightclub, but it turns out when we went to the Whiskey A Go-Go in West Hollywood, it was the branching point that the Mighty Clouds, honestly, and I read an article somewhere that it was because of that show that the Mighty Clouds won their first Grammy Awards.
Okay, just let me help our viewing audience to let them know that the Whiskey A Go-Go was a very popular night spot here in the city of Los Angeles, Hollywood, where, I mean, the stars went.
Exactly.
It wasn't a place where the gospel community went. It was a place where the stars went here in Los Angeles back in the day. So now, because of the Mighty Clouds going there, and then the audience was very receptive to them.
The audience was very receptive because at that time we had more church folks than we had regular center folks in there. It's because they could not believe here's a group that's coming, a gospel group coming into a nightclub, and when they heard that Prez and the Mighty Clouds and Prez were going into the Whiskey A Go-Go, a discotheque, by the way, doing Ride the Mighty High, and the Mighty Clouds of Joy was their theme song. The rest became history. I mean, everybody just flooded West Hollywood to see this happen.
What do you think was the longevity of the Mighty Clouds? Because the Mighty Clouds just gave us good music, and when you heard that Joe Lagan was going to be in town, number one, Joe Lagan, bless his spirit, by himself was just a whirlwind. And then Joe Lagan with the Mighty Clouds of Joy was something else. What do you think maybe was to their longevity? Because people never got tired of it.
To tell you the truth, it goes back to a little place in Alabama called Troy, Alabama.
Troy, Alabama.
Joe Lagun, Dave Shirley, these people, Dave Shirley's a current artist today, has an identity with the Mighty Clouds and Troy, Alabama. Wait a minute.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, oh yeah,
Mr.
yeah.
Dave Shirley?
Yeah, Dave Shirley. The Dave Shirley now that has reflections of Dave Shirley. Yeah, musician as well also, which he started out as a musician and then became a singer like another artist known as Lee Williams, you understand?
Right.
Joe Lagun had that kind of voice that his grandfather had back in the day, and he was super, just super with that voice. He identified with Julius Cheeks and the late Reverend Cleopas Robinson and C.L. Franklin. Joe Lagun's voice spoke for itself, and he made the Mighty Clouds of Joy.
Now, of course, those of you that are listening, you hear these names, and of course, if any of our millennials are listening, you may not necessarily recognize them, but these people paved the way. They were pioneers in the gospel music industry, and that's why we had to interview veteran radio announcer Dr. Prez Blackmon, because this history, the current artists today, they are standing on the shoulders of these people that you hear Dr. Prez Blackmon talking about, because they broke many barriers, but they didn't get paid like artists are getting paid today.
The only group that got paid good back then was Mama Dorothy Smith and a group called Inner Fire with Pastor Janice Brown. She took a Glenn Campbell song and turned it all the way around in gospel and paved the way for a group.
Glenn Campbell, a country singer.
Right.
Okay.
Pastor Janice Brown came and changed it to gospel, and from that point on there, that was an opening door for a lot of groups to go across overseas. because Pastor Janice Brown, she looked like the late great Aretha Franklin. Plus, she could sing and she could preach, and she had a voice. And when she took that song, the rest became history.
And Pastor Janice Brown is a fashionista.
Oh yeah.
The woman can dress. I mean, she can really dress. But now, as I listen to you say that many doors was open, because it was you that schooled me on Jodeci, KC and JoJo, that they were originally
the Haley Singers.
Right, Little Cedric,
right,
and the Haley Singers.
Yeah.
And so I said, I didn't know that. And I was just thinking about that. Do you know 50% of our secular artists came out of the church?
This is so true.
And it might be more than 50%.
I would agree with that.
That they came out of the church. So I believe there is something. I'm trying to piece it all together. But if the church provided the secular world with at least 50% of their artists, there is some kind of connection here. Because if you notice that Tasha Cobb, she did a gospel song where she featured Nicki Minaj on it. But when Hammer featured Tremaine Hawkins in Do Not Pass Me By, the church crucified Tremaine Hawkins. Mm-hmm. And I often say that the church owes Tremaine Hawkins a great apology for the way they crucified her for singing with Hammer, MC Hammer, and because the records were being played, that song was being played on Soul Train and in various clubs and everything, and they just crucified her. They crucified Vicki Winans also for wearing pants on the Stellars years ago. So
when you think about Hammer, I introduced his first gospel song. Jonathan Mosley, who at the time was Hammer's road manager, at the same token, he brought it to me at KTYM. It was called Pray. And from that point on there, Hammer became identified with gospel music. And had not, according to Jonathan Mosley at the time, had not it happened with Pray, we probably would have never known Hammer in gospel.
But you see, it all goes full circle because now he's preaching.
Right.
Yeah, he come back to preaching. Just like Al Green. Al Green, you also work with Al Green.
Right, right.
And even though he had a very lucrative career in R&B, now he's pastoring in Tennessee, I believe it is.
Memphis, Tennessee.
Right. He's pastoring in Tennessee. It's Bishop Al Green. So there's so many, even though they go out into the secular world, they come back. Now, you have been so instrumental in this city of Los Angeles, and you, people don't really realize how you take the humble road. You like to, believe it or not, for those that may not know, Dr. Blackmon, Prez Blackmon, he likes to stay in the background and push other people up and push people forward and things like that. In closing with our interview, I would like to know what advice would you give, especially having a career that has spanned as long as your career has. Not only was it a career for you, it was a calling in the radio broadcasting. But gospel, promoting, managing, and I might as well say consulting, because you give great advice in how to operate in the gospel music industry. What would be your final words to us?
My final words would be, whatever you do in life, take the F-A-I-T-H road. But normally that would just say faith, but each one of those letters has a significant meaning. F-A-I-T-H. Forsaking all, I trust him. And when you trust him, that is faith. And If you take that road, I guarantee you, you will never have a chance to use the EGO approach in gospel, and that's easing God out. You cannot ease God out and have faith at the same time.
You always have a way with that words. Now we can still hear that golden voice, because there's only one Prez Blackmon, known as the voice, also as the chairman. Every Sunday, at what time, on the West Coast, Los Angeles time, where can we hear you now on the broadcast?
Sunday mornings, 8 o'clock on KALI 900 AM, high atop Rollers Bowl country on the 4th floor, churching with Prez ground, where you're much better with me on than off. Tell all of your friends what they're missing to. They're not listening to KALI.
And also, it simultaneously is on Facebook as well. So for those of you, you can just tune into your Facebook on Dr. Blackmon's page. You can also, as he said,
I have a page.
Dr. Charles Williams page. It would be Dwayne Williams page on Facebook, and you can hear the golden voice of the chairman himself giving us that wonderful gospel music like he always does. Once again, this has been Gospel International, bringing you their history, featuring our own, Los Angeles own, the West Coast veteran radio announcer, Dr. Prez Blackmon. I have been your host for today, none other than Dr. Susie Jones.